we're already struggling with labor, then why do you need to jump in your truck if I can fly something to you 50 miles away and returns? But I'm saying that there's more technology coming, Brian, very rapidly that we're going to have to be able to maintain and keep running. And so it's changed. This landscape's changing very rapidly.
Welcome to the Crop Science Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Ernell. I'm the Extension Specialist at Oklahoma State University, and I work in precision ag and nutrient management. Today, I can't be more excited about our guest today. It's Dr. John Fulton with Ohio State. John and I go back more than a couple years. We've spent a few hours in airlines and airplanes, traveling across the world. But Dr. Fulton is professor and extension specialist at Ohio State University. And you read through his bio, and it says technology and farm data are becoming more integral to producing food. His research and extension focuses on machinery, automation, and the use of spatial data to improve farm business and in-season decisions, with specialization in developing, evaluating technology or automated components related to application of equipment to more accurately place, meet site-specific crop needs. Basically, John's an engineer. He does some really cool stuff in precision ag, and he can speak to farmers. One of the best I've ever seen as far as being able to be a biosystems ag engineer to relate with a farmer or producer. So, John, welcome to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about how you ended up at Ohio State, because it's kind of been a circle, I know.
Yeah. Well, first, Brian, it's always a pleasure to visit with you and to be here on the podcast. So thanks for inviting me that. And kind of my road to Ohio State really began when I was at University of Kentucky and working on my PhD. And once I finished that up, Auburn University down in Alabama invited me to consider going down there, and it was a humbling experience to take a faculty position down there. And I spent a little over 10 years at Auburn, and that's really, as a faculty member, got started with all the research and extension and teaching as well. And then, well, it's we're working on 10 years now. Ohio State gave me an opportunity to be a faculty member in what we call our food, ag, and biological engineering department, with a real interest in trying to grow their precision ag program. Kind of take it, and I feel like we've done a pretty good job of that, of building a team and some components to that we serve not only research, but more importantly, we like to get that information out to growers in different formats to, we call that extension here at these land grant institutions. But that's kind of my path to Ohio State. And I always say that it's a real humbling experience to serve the farmers here in the state of Ohio.
Yeah, so it's great watching you. So, kind of tell the listeners some of the research and extension you've been focused on. Let's say the last, well, you could go 10 years, but the more recent activities you've been doing.
Yeah, I think when I first got, not only it really started at Auburn, but let's, kind of fast forward to when I got going here at Ohio State. Did a lot of work on planter technology. We kind of, by that point, 10 years ago, had really kind of moved beyond just metering to downforce, and we were talking about wing downforce. There's just a tremendous volume of planner technology coming out at that time, and really getting involved with different companies and doing some research. So had a privilege to move that to multi-hybrid. Did quite a bit of multi-hybrid where we were looking at placement of different varieties or hybrids in case of corn, and did that for about 4 years. And maybe not the success that some of us thought may be there, but I think it really showcased we needed to understand more about not only the environments and site-specific management, but how to better place, if we're going to do that strategy of placement of varieties and hybrids out, in fields. That kind of then got into high-speed planning. We've done quite a bit of work on that front, and we've kind of seen that, be adopted, at least here in Ohio. And so that's been an interesting, a few years of just not researching, but you're seeing farmers adopt that technology, not merely to go, I guess you would say to go faster, but we have a lot of large farmers, and the questions was, what's our performance in our conditions, traveling, we'll say 10 miles an hour, 8 to 10 miles an hour. And so we were able to document that and kind of give some guidelines and recommendations back to our growers. And today, we a lot of growers gone from like 3 90-foot planters down to 2 60-foot planters, things like that. So we've seen where these type technologies have really impacted some of our growers. And we think about kind of advance into today, labor shortages. Well, I don't need 3 operators, I can get by with 2. I mean, there's some of these things that are real pain points for some of our growers, and that's what we're really working in today is some of the automation. How does automation fit not just today, but what's it going to look like in the future, and looking at business models. And probably most importantly, Brian, I've been working more on nutrient management. Nitrogen and phosphorus is probably the most debated nutrients here in the state of Ohio. Phosphorus being the lead, but nitrogen being right behind, and concerns that poses to water bodies and just the general public's perception. But really trying to think through not what we've done in the past, but how do we better manage NP and K, even on the phosphorus, potash. And I know rely a lot on folks like yourself to think through not only research but strategies to be more contemporary in how we manage those. And so we're doing quite a bit of research on that front, not only just looking at sources, but placement, timing, that becomes important. But a little bit maybe how to influence or change some of our future recommendations as well, and improve more regionally. Maybe we talk site specifically, right? That would be within a field in my mind, but even just breaking that out regionally, because we see some differences of production environments here in the state of Ohio. So full capacity planters, fertilizer applications, sprayers, PWM technology. That's kind of my core research. And now more recently, it's how do we put sensors on those machines to provide feedback, or in the case of automation, actually control in real time what's going on those machines. So
All right. So normally when I have guests, I'm taking notes, and I've already filled up a page because I had stuff for you, but you already say things. So one, I'm going to tell just a little bit of background that it's intriguing how I came to know John. It's because as a graduate student myself, I was involved with a lot of engineers. So as an agronomist, I had 2 engineers on my dissertation committee, which is probably not that common for a soil scientist to have 2 soil scientists and 2 engineers on a dissertation. But those engineers brought me into the fold, I guess you would say. And I've had a massive respect for the combination of agronomy and engineering in those locations that could work together, because it's not very common, at least what I think, across land grants where we have a really good collaboration between engineers and agronomy. But it's really critical when we start coming to getting applied and ready to go tech and the development of tech. And so, John, can you speak a little bit to your experiences of combining the engineering approach with working with folks like me that just break things?
I think we all break things, right? That's how we learn. I mean, failure leads to success in my mind, right? Over anything that we do. But so first, I'd say, Brian, you guys at Oklahoma State have had a long history, in my viewpoint, that I've known, that of agronomists, engineers, and other disciplines working together to kind of solve or develop new strategies, technologies. And so you guys have done a really good job of influencing people like me and how I think and learn, because I would say today, in we call it precision ag, and we've chosen in the last few years to describe it as digital agriculture, because that kind of brings in the analytics. Now we're talking artificial intelligence, predicting, right, with all these things. But digital ag, when I look at that, you know your guys' influence of data and this technology, I think, is a convergence of disciplines. I mean, I can't make the best widget in the world if I don't know how it's going to be applied or the impact it may have at a farm. And so it takes a comprehensive solution right? When you develop new, what I call strategies, or how we're going to do, conduct farm practices, or new technology that we're going to insert on a machine to do something. It's a convergence of those practices today. So I believe in that. You guys have had a tremendous influence on my thought process and how I handle it. And quite frankly, every one of my grad students today not only just has engineers, but we go outside and I'll say require them to have one or two different disciplines on their graduate committee, because that brings that another perspective, another appreciation. And I just believe it's that synergistic effect. You really can really wrap your hands around a scientific challenge and better have a solution that's more comprehensive and robust than it's just me or us engineers or you guys, maybe we'll say as agronomists. And I prefer we're just all working in ag. We all have our expertise, and it's how do we blend that together? So um, it's a real need, and I would say in industry, that's what we hear. Industry comes and visit with us, and they're always wanting to get plugged into like courses, especially our like senior design would be a really good example. We have these capstone experiences, and they'll tell you, I don't, we can go hire a computer engineer, we can go hire a biologist or microbiologist to do biology type work in a company. But what we need from folks like you is we need a combination student that understands technology, potentially understands fertility, like in your case, and then understands the business part of that, because they're going to be working in a company that they may not be the salesperson, but they got to support that salesperson. And so I think that's a highlight of what industry for disciplines like you and I work in are asking us to do, is if they can even understand farming and can communicate to the computer engineer, which is a different language, and I mean that in a very positive professional way, but you got to explain to them you are creating an app or uh, a digital tool, and it's got to do this because this is how the farmer or consultant is going to use it. So that's probably a long-winded answer to you, but I guess I'd really emphasize, we are operating in a very small world today because of this, being digital, and with that, comes a tremendous volume of information available to anyone. So it's if we're going to keep up and continue to have valuable science inform the farm, we all got to work together. And I think what you said, and I think, like I said, what you said about working with other departments, we're doing that here at Ohio State. I think there's a value add to that, and it really makes our solutions more robust.
So let's get down to some nuts and bolts and actually talk some engineering. So you talked to planner stuff, and so I think planters, I think the soils aspect of the planter, of course. So talk to me a little bit about the trade-off on horsepower, horsepower and tractor demands for pulling a 90-foot planter at 4 versus a 60-foot or whatever planter at 11. What's our horsepower, tractor weight, and the influence on the soil? Is it the same? Am I not gaining anything by going smaller and faster, or can I actually draw down some tractor weight?
When we take and we'll just say we're gonna go from a traditional vacuum or metering type planner and say that we're going to move to something with this what I would describe as the speed tubes on it. You're going to have more horsepower, and that's going to be on several fronts. Number one, most of these high speed planners are electric. Number one, and so you got to make sure you got the electrical power to support all of that. And newer tractors do. Let's just think about the evolution of just recent tractors. Secondly, you got to have the hydraulic power. When you're going, we'll say 10 miles an hour, number one, you got to have technology. You got to have guidance technology. It is extremely hard for a human being to maintain, we'll say, a straight line or whatever your preferred path is manually. You have to have guidance. If not, really, you need RTK auto guidance to make that happen. Secondly, when you move to that, you got to have hydraulic downforce. That's a given. Now, some may have some of the pneumatic, but we found and recommend out of our shop, you need hydraulic downforce. So I say all that you need electric power, you got hydraulic power, and oh by the way, when you start going 10 miles an hour, you just can't hook any tractor to a 40, 60, 90-foot planter. Really, most of ours, we'll see 40 or 60. You're going to need 300, if not 400 horsepower to be pulling some of that. And so we've really transitioned out of this phase where typically in my mind on farms we just hooked whatever tractor was available and was convenient and wasn't interrupting other field operations, we'll say tillage or anything else that may be going on farm. We just hooked any tractor up and never had to worry about horsepower, to a situation that if I want to transition and use a high-speed planter, then I'm going to have a pretty significantly horsepower tractor. um, I'll tell you, we have, back when we were doing some of the research. Now we were going a little bit faster than 10 miles an hour, but we brought a 400 horse quad track to its knees one day going up an incline.
As we move to this high speed, and I'm looking at tractors, and I'm going back to the soils, John. Do you expect more or less slippage as you move, tire slippage as you move from something big that you're pulling versus something that's moving at a faster clip? I'm thinking about that soil to tire interaction. Does that change as we go from 4 and 5 mile an hour to 10 and 11 mile an hour, or even not 9 or 10 mile an hour?
Well, by the basic laws that we know, or physics, we always have to have slip to propel a tractor. So you're always going to have slip. Now, the amount of slip that's going to have occur is going to be based on the field conditions, right? So if we're wet and muddy, we're going to have a lot more slip than if it's dry necessarily, right? So it's really going to be the conditions of the field conditions, soil conditions, as you put it, that are going to drive the amount of slip. um, I don't know that I would say today that you're going to have it, significant change. The question is having the horsepower there to propel. So if I don't have the horsepower, right, I'm going to have a lot more slip because it's struggling. We'll say it in that way. So, but when we have 350, 400 horsepower, if not 500, in some of our high speed planners that we use for research, typically slip isn't a concern. And the other thing that's kind of changed, Brian, this may be a little different in Oklahoma, but I'll say in our neck of the woods, tracks have become a lot popular. Number one, not only on the tractor itself, but also on planters. And there's some stability and a little bit more tire soil base there, right, area to help with that as well. So, but at minimum, you got to have slip would be a take home message, and then secondly, let's make sure we got more than enough horsepower to pull a 40-foot, high speed planter at 10 miles an hour in the field conditions that are local there to wherever you're running.
You and I have had a lot of chats about autonomy and this, along with Dr. Shearer, who I think I get to have on as a guest in the very near future too. So I can't. I mean, between a drop from Fulton to Shearer, it's like this is couldn't have been better, a better prep. But so I keep thinking we've talked about this for 10 years. Is like the win of autonomy is smaller and less compaction. I was hoping that high speed we could move away from. So are we just adding to compaction right now?
Well, I'll let Dr. Shear dive into that. I mean, and
Okay.
give some of the figures he's come up with. But what I'll tell you is the concern I have is we just continue to get bigger. I mean, I'm sure in Oklahoma you could do an audit and there's probably a 400 or 500 horsepower tractor sitting around somewhere in Oklahoma
Oh yeah.
just because I can get it. And we're at the farm show in Germany, and you're looking at class 10 combines. I mean, these are just heavy. So regardless of what we try and put on them, tracks or trying to to try and get that load distributed,
Mm-hmm.
mass is mass at the end of the day. And so it definitely, especially in the conditions we're operating in, meaning when I say conditions, when I look at our springs and some of our falls. Now we had a really good run here in our fall, but there's been years where there's not, the windows are pretty
Yeah.
tight. We
No.
get rains, we got 3 or 4 days, and what I would describe is we're going to be operating those machines in marginal conditions, and in that we're going to, just because of the mere weight or mass of these machines, you're going to have influence not only on surface compaction but even deep compaction. And so if you're growing some of those crops like corn, that require a little deeper rooting volume, depth, we're impacting that, and I think we have evidence to say that. But we're my point in there's not a real lot of evidence that we're stopping building bigger machines. I mean, I can go buy multi-hundred horsepower machines today, and it continues to be that way.
Well, I mean, and you're right. I shouldn't just stick with tractors. The combines are huge. Our grain carts are getting massive. And of course, at harvest, a grain cart, you have a lot of opportunity for wet soil. So, I mean, we're getting bigger. I'll move away from the compaction and maybe hit Dr. Shearer about that later. So, I do have another route for you, but we're going to stick with the planters. I've been to several meetings, whether it's green or it doesn't matter the company. I have a lot of tech meetings, a lot of farm shows. A common question that I hear farmers ask, and I'd like to hear your take, is we got to the point where we couldn't hardly work on tractors because of the technology. Are we also there with planters and sprayers? Is that, I could do about anything I want on an ExactEmerge 2 when it broke that vacuum planter, but are we able to break down with our new planters and have it back in the field, or are we getting to a point where technical service is going to be so critical?
Yeah, so I think you're getting down to, so let's kind of set the stage maybe a little bit. So number one, when you allude to tractors, you're talking about the right to repair. That's been an ongoing concern and litigation in a couple states. And there's an article that crops up every once in a while, right, in Farm Press. And so I, and then secondly, I think what you're suggesting is, as we look at planters and now even sprayers
Mm-hmm.
and heck combines,
Yeah.
to that degree, we just continually see more and more technology, meaning sensors and wiring harnesses are connecting all that up, and so it's just more and more. Really, what we're doing is automating those machines, right? That's really what's going on. And
More and more electronics, less mechanisms.
true, that's right. And so all of a sudden, you got all these electronics, and so and then even that embedded in those electronics. Now we've got we're still early, as you got artificial intelligence embedded. We got downforce that can automatically adjust based on field conditions. It learns and it does that adjustment rather than we dialing that in the display or up in the cab. We still kind of do a preset to that, but it actually will adjust based on conditions. Same for a combine. You get some of the like the X9 combines, it's red, AGCO, New Holland. You get these new combines, they have intelligence built into them as well. So I say all that, it's beyond the electronics. Now all of a sudden you got, intelligence built into them. And so how do I maintenance that?
Yeah.
Right? That's what you're getting down to. And so I think as time goes on, it's kind of like cars and trucks. I mean, I think that gives you insight of what's going on. And the question is can I plug in is there enough information at we'll say the operator station on the display that indicates this is what's an issue, or do I have to call someone with the right diagnostics tools to go out, plug into the machine and say, oh, hey, your ECU, or you got an issue over here with this sensor or whatever. But that's where we're heading. And so I think more and more farmers, kind of like we've done with our cars and trucks, right? I mean, we've evolved to this today, that you're going to have to either build that core competency as you go on and kind of that your own expertise within the farm, or you're going to have to rely on service providers, your dealership.
Well, I know. I mean, it kills me, but I can't change the spark plugs in my truck anymore because I can't reach them. That is the most frustrating thing, that I can't service a vehicle that I know how to traditionally do all the things, but I can't even see the spark plugs, much less reach them anymore.
Yeah, any kind of engine repair.
Are you seeing in your area? Are you seeing the service providers, the equipment suppliers, the Deeres, the Cases? Are they ramping up their internal capabilities at the same rate that we're seeing equipment put on the scene? Or is there a little bit of lag with, okay, I mean, I just talked to our local John Deere, our biggest John Deere. They're getting their first See and Spray on site. I know the folks really well. I'm not sure if they're ready to service a See and Spray.
I think there's been some lag with the training and education and to support those technologies, but it hopefully it comes. What I will say, if you just look at the last 5 years, and again go back to your Deere dealership or Case and ask them how many people they've hired into their AMS department or their precision ag department, and I think that gives you beginning to give you evidence that they're trying to build capacity and expertise to deal with these technologies that are essentially become embedded. I mean, right? You buy the tractor today. I've got guidance. I got the GPS. Like, oh, by the way, I don't have to unlock anything to do variable rate or connect my planner and do variable rate. It's just there. And so a see and spray or spot spray um, is going to be the same thing. I think you're seeing them ramp up, but I would characterize in a lot of cases there is some lag, and you end up having to call someone that does have the expertise. But hopefully, over time, the training and experiences come along where they can do that more locally, and when you do have an issue.
I mean, it's not a new problem. I remember, it might have been 10, 15, or I'm older than I want to say, years ago, where we saw, especially most of our dealers that were really good at selling steel, all of a sudden went from selling disc, planters, plows to selling sprayers with technology. And there was a pretty big lag then. And so, what I'd at least say from our area is that, like you said, we're lagging, but it wasn't as bad as it was when we had that first technology push. It seems like we're a little bit ahead of the curve, not up to speed, but we're moving, building capacity quicker than we did 15 years ago.
And again, I just share with everyone listening that I teach a precision ag class, and we'll have upper 30s to 50 students, and out of that annually, I'd say anywhere from 6 to 10 students have a precision ag. I'll call it a technology-based job when they graduate. And so that's from a dealership to a retailer or co-op to other companies that are supporting, production ag or livestock ag. They're looking for these folks to have a technology interest and to be able to service and potentially, like I said, support sales and things like that. But it's a big thrust right now with all companies to have beginning to build this team that can help take questions, have a call center or whatever they're trying to build to help those farmers keep those machines running, keep the farm being efficient, and do trainings, not only training farmers a little bit, but what more importantly I think you're getting down to is making sure the people at the dealership or the retail store is getting the right training, so when there is a question or an issue crops up, they'll have it. Here's one I'll throw out to you, just kind of thinking through all this because this is something at the forefront of some things that we're doing. What about when we're already starting to talk about drones? I mean, drone spraying has been around for a few years. Really, it's taken off here in the state of Ohio the last 2 years and is going to grow even more. But what I'm saying is, well, what happens when we not only are spraying, but we are delivering cover crops here? But what about delivery? I mean, that's not too far off. But my point is, who's going to support all that? Because I'm going to have a dedicated drone suite probably at a dealership or retailer. Some of these drones have 500 pounds capacity when they finally open up some things legally. And from what we're being told, at least in the state of Ohio, that's going to happen in rural areas before it happens in the urban areas again. So we can talk about FedEx and UPS and Amazon and what they're wanting to do. But I think it's going to have a huge impact for us in ag because we're already struggling with labor. And why do you need to jump in your truck if I can fly something to you 50 miles away and it returns? But I'm saying that there's more technology coming, Brian, very rapidly that we're going to have to be able to maintain and keep running. And so it's changed. This landscape's changing very rapidly.
Well, and I'm not going to go there. We can come back again. But as I'm saying, especially with the spray stuff, we're not prepped on how we're training these, and the regulations not prepped for it yet. We're still lagging behind on that because I'm doing a talk in 2 hours on drones and IPM. So well versed in that, but it's okay. Applicator's license. Let's look at chemical labels. There's a whole lot in that world that I don't want to breach now, because you teed me up on something as far as like setting me up for a conversation in the last couple of minutes with you. Technically, all right, what are you doing on NP, nitrogen and phosphorus? Because you're dabbling in my world and you're not working that much with me. So how are you going to get me up to Ohio?
Well, I don't know if I'd say I'm not working with you. I think we both have schedules that probably if we would ask each other, hey, we need to get together more frequently, the answer to that would be absolutely. We need to have more discussions. But, don't forget, when I need some expertise, who do I call? I'm going to be calling you, and we're going to have a pretty detailed and I'll probably call you back even after I think about it. But what are we doing? So, there's a couple things. Um, you know, so on nitrogen, the question is in my mind, I'll put it to you this way. I'll keep it kind of high level, Brian. We're doing split application, and we know that's profitable for our growers, in particular for corn. That's what we're talking about: split application of nitrogen, and I believe what my mind is set on is how do we do? What's our next step to say I want to put X amount out and try and maximize uptake by the plant, in particular corn in our case, a little bit on the wheat side. So what is our next steps versus and I get the prices ebb and flowed, but I do believe that we're going to be challenged in the near future, either through regulations or just having the public continue to look over the shoulders of our farmers about, well, what are you doing now? I hear that you're doing this, and so when we think about, and at least in my mind, how do we appropriately consider variable rate nitrogen, which we have some growers doing variable rate nitrogen, but how do we inform that to make sure that we're being profitable when we can't predict weather if I'm doing it at a V6 stage? Does that make sense? So we're doing more thinking and trying to work with growers that doing more what I describe as a mid-season. I'm warm on the late season, but it's a mindset. It's a different mindset. You've got to be ready and thinking, what am I not just doing in June to side dress, but what am I doing in late June and July if I'm going to do this mid-season? That's a different view. And if you want to get to what you guys have proven to crop sensors, my opinion on all this is we've got to get to that point, because at that point, then growers will start to appreciate what a crop sensor would do for them. And I know you guys have, I mean, it's like talking to wall, right? You just have to get to the next level of thinking and saying, this is my cost and I can do this site specifically. And oh, then now I understand why I need the sensor.
I mean, you're talking my world of this, and it's a whole world where at this moment still, and I thought we would have moved on by now. At this moment still, the risk aversion to yield loss is greater than risk aversion to environmental losses or risk. As simple as that, or even economic. I know many farmers that will still be willing to have a little bit of economic risk as far as expenses and stuff, to be risk averse to yield. And we'll see as it goes. There's a whole lot on the federal side as that happens, and we got a lot of this and that coming through. But we won't, in my opinion, we won't have massive advancements in nitrogen management as long as yield risk aversion is the predominant risk aversion. We until we shift to economic sociology or environment, there is no benefit for me to short my nitrogen if I am yield risk adverse.
Now, the only thing I would note in there is if I have a technology that enables to do some things that maybe I haven't been able to do. And so take this just one example. And again, this is very early stages. If you and I might, for all of our listeners, being the university, we've had opportunity to work with 360 Rain, that product, and it's new. And all of a sudden, as an example, it's robotic. once you get it set up and if you have the pumping there. But basically, our dairy farmers and swine farmers and anyone that's saying hi, this is it's a hot cake. I say all that, Brian, is I can go out and finally, in a robotic situation, not run over my crop, and I can spoon feed, spoon deliver what's in those lagoons in a form of NPK. I know, but my point is, all of a sudden we potentially have a tool to change that equation a little.
I do think on the animal waste side that we have more capability, and I'm a little pessimist, and we'll have to talk later because I'm running out of time. But I want to give you props. I was always the drone poo-pooer in amongst our conversations, and I have seen the adoption even in rural pasture Oklahoma come up, and I can tell you at least 6 rigs that have been bought in the last 6 months that are full blown multi or not. It's not multi drone, but single drone large rigs. And so the conversations in the last year have developed massively. So I'm going to give you props on that. You called me out and I called you out and you win that argument. And so I owe you a drink on that one.
It's time for our famous 3.
But for sake of time, we're going to wrap this up because you and I could go on we have gone on for hours. So let's just go and respect your time. Couple just questions about you that we do to wrap this up is, what's a go-to work resource that you have, or something when it comes to what you do? What's your go-to resource?
I guess I can't pick one. So I definitely have a suite of university literature that I will go to. So I'll just use the term Google. That's a pretty easy way out, but I can do a quick search and get to information that we're looking for specifically for research or in the practical sense. So that's a pretty big one. Just I'll call it Google, but I got a couple of universities like yourselves that I get to pretty quick to find resources to help us out.
Next question is probably I know the answer, and it's probably going to be slighted because you're a father with active kids. But what's your favorite leisurely activity, especially this time in life?
Yeah, it's kids, right? I mean, we're at the point where we show cattle. My kids play basketball, they play soccer, and are in other activities, and that's pretty much my wife's and I's second job, right? Is we get to do this during relatively normal hours, we'll say, not always, but then we get home or I get home, it's the kids, and boy, it's fun, but it's busy, but it's good stuff.
And finally, so if people want to find more about what you're doing at The Ohio State, and I hadn't been able to drop that one yet, at The Ohio State, where do people go, and maybe some of the stuff that you guys are putting together right now?
Yeah, so 2 things. If you just will say Google or do an online search, just search Ohio State Precision Ag or Ohio State Digital Ag, you'll get to our website, and there's quite a bit of resources on yield monitors, a lot of information on that, nutrient management like we were talking about. And our second real resource, and I encourage people to go to, is what we call our Ohio State E-Fields, E and then fields as it sounds. And we're in the midst of publishing our 2023 E-Fields report, which is a culmination of extension, educators, state specialists, faculty. It's really our on-farm publication that we do annually, and it comes out the first week of January. So it's an online resource. If you do, like I said, Ohio State E-Fields, you should be able to get to the webpage and see everything's online. But if there's a listener out there that would like to see hard copy, we print several thousands, and majority of those get sent out. We're happy to send a hard copy to folks that are interested in having that and browsing it and seeing what we're doing.
Well, John, we don't get to do this enough. I appreciate your time, willing to come on the podcast and visit with us for a while. I hope the rest of your fall and winter goes well and spring planting hits hard.
Same for you, man. It's always great to chat.
Thank you.